Hi, I'm Kristy, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. On this portion of the channel, we like to talk about cults, crimes, conspiracies, controversies, and then we have a whole other side of the channel where we're very like yoga, witchcraft, meditation, self-love, self-help focused. So we truly have a little patchwork quilt of absolutely everything going on. Basically, just everything that I love to talk about, everything that I love to learn about, and everything that I love to share, all in the one YouTube channel. So if you like any or all of that stuff, please do subscribe and become part of the coven. So today we are talking about the horrors of Oz. And if you're anything like me, then The Wizard of Oz will give you such a nostalgic, warm reminder of your childhood. Back to a time where somewhere over the rainbow there was witches, wizards, magic, munchkins, yellow brick roads, emerald cities, and ruby slippers. And since its release in 1939, that is almost 85 years ago, it has definitely stood the test of time and is still to this day considered one of the greatest pieces of cinema that has ever existed. From the costume design to the beautiful set that was so ahead of its time, to the special effects, and of course the soundtrack, which is arguably one of the greatest movie soundtracks that has ever existed. And of course we can't speak about the soundtrack without speaking about Judy Garland and her phenomenal performance as Dorothy Gale. So we really can't deny just quite how iconic The Wizard of Oz has been and continues to be, and I don't doubt that in another 85 years time people will still be watching the original Wizard of Oz and kids will still be just as amazed by it as they were 85 years ago. However, there is no denying how magical The Wizard of Oz is, that it is creepy as shit. Let's be honest here, The Wizard of Oz is fucking creepy. It may have entertained people for decades, but it is fucking horrified and creeped people out all the same. I distinctly remember being absolutely scared shitless at the scene with all the guards when they're all trying to like sneak into the witch's tower. That was just fucking horrifying for me. And oh my god, the fucking trees. The tree part was actually a part that I forgot, and for when I was putting this video together I went and rewatched The Wizard of Oz. I have rewatched The Wizard of Oz like countless times over the years, but not in a good few years now. So like I rewatched it and that scene with the trees and I was like, this is actually like pretty fucking terrifying, and it like brought up some stuff from my childhood where I remember that I was absolutely fucking terrified of that scene. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, The Wizard of Oz is one of the biggest horror films of all time. And it's not just within the movie. The scary shit that happens within the movie is absolutely nothing compared to the real life horrors that went on while making The Wizard of Oz. So I feel like the best place to start is with Judy Garland, of course, playing the sweet and lovable main protagonist of the movie, Dorothy Gale. When you think of The Wizard of Oz, you think of Dorothy. When you think of Dorothy, you think of Judy Garland. Even when you think Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that has become so strongly associated with Judy Garland because of her performance and her beautiful voice that it's almost impossible to imagine anybody else actually ever playing the role of Dorothy. So you might be surprised to learn that she actually was in MGM Studios' first pick to play Dorothy. The part of Dorothy was originally given to Shirley Temple, who I'm sure you might already know, but she was one of the biggest child stars of her time. Very well known for being like super cute, like ringletty little hair, very sweet little girl. At the time of casting, Shirley Temple was only about 10 years old, which does seem a lot more fitting for the role of Dorothy in comparison to Judy Garland, who was 16 at the time, and Dorothy is supposed to be this very young, very sweet little farm girl. And actually in the original Wizard of Oz books, Dorothy is no more than 10 years old, so she is definitely supposed to be a child. But it was actually Judy Garland's voice that swayed the choice, and eventually she got given the role because they knew that they wanted Dorothy to be a big singing part, and they just felt like Shirley Temple, although maybe she looked more the part, there was no denying that Judy was absolutely Dorothy, even though she was a young woman, 16 years old, supposed to be portraying someone much, much younger. And of course, for Judy, this role done absolute wonders for her career, and it is her most well-known role. Judy had actually been performing pretty much since she was straight out the womb, but it was the Wizard of Oz that really skyrocketed her into fame, and like I said, it's the role that everyone knows her for. And this stardom may seem like a good thing, but as you probably already know, children who become Hollywood sensations at such a young age, they usually have a lot of shit to deal with, and it's not normal, and it's not healthy for your still developing brain to be put under so much pressure at such a young age and be so sensationalized and kind of expected to totally put your childhood to the side for the sake of this fame and stardom. Oftentimes children, when they reach such high levels of fame, they can be treated kind of more like pawns for the adults in their life to kind of place about and play with, to kind of live vicariously through them, or it's oftentimes very financially motivated, and the feelings and well-being of the child kind of come second to what the adults in their life want. And unfortunately, Judy was no exception to this. It is alleged throughout the filming of The Wizard of Oz, and allegedly from the age of only 10 years old, Judy's mum actually had her on a cocktail of drugs so that she could meet the high expectations of being on a movie set. So she was basically expected to be more of a robot than she was a little girl. So during the day, she would be given drugs known as uppers to kind of give her a boost and get her through long filming days, which on The Wizard of Oz were often up to 72 hours long, and she was expected to be like on her game for that length of time. Obviously, people physically and mentally cannot do that because it's just not how our body is programmed. So her mum would give her these uppers so that she could make her way through the long filming days and have all the energy for singing and dancing. And then at night time, when Judy wasn't able to sleep, and she would probably have to be up on set early the next day, so getting rest was important so that she could get back up and go to work. Her mum would provide her with downers so that she could then basically be sedated and put to sleep. And then this cycle continued, and of course, like anyone would, Judy became reliant on these drugs. Obviously, if you're relying on drugs to keep you awake all of the time, and then you're relying on drugs to put you to sleep all of the time, it doesn't take too long before your body becomes fully reliant on that, and it completely falls out of its natural rhythm, and it doesn't know how to be awake and be asleep without the help of these drugs. And I can't even imagine, I can only think about this from what that would be like as like an adult to rely on those drugs. I just can't even imagine what it would be like for a little girl if she started taking these when she was 10. Like, insane. And by the time that the filming of The Wizard of Oz had wrapped up, Judy was completely addicted to amphetamines and barbiturates. And as you may know, we're not going to get into it like too much today because we're going to focus more on The Wizard of Oz. But as you will probably know, when Judy Garland eventually did die, it was due to an accidental drug overdose, because struggling with substances was something that she continued to deal with throughout her entire life, and in my opinion this was through no fault of her own, because it was basically pushed on her from she was tiny. So like I said, Judy was 16 at the time, and even though she was very short, she was only around 4'10", which I was actually really shocked to find out that she was so tiny. The frame of a 16-year-old girl is obviously very different from that of a 10-year-old girl. Of course, when you're 16, you're kind of going through puberty, or maybe you've been going through puberty for a while. You're starting to develop curves in breasts and a more adult looking physique than a 10-year-old little girl. And because the studio still wanted her to look like a little girl, they bandaged down her breasts throughout most of filming, and they would also make her wear a very restrictive corset that Judy said at the time often she felt like the corset must have been made out of steel, and she felt like she couldn't breathe because it was wrapped in so tightly to try and make her look as thin as possible. Now, obviously, the bandaging down of breasts and stuff is something that can happen on movie sets quite regularly if you're trying to portray a certain type of character. But the fact that Judy's body was literally corseted in so tight, when a lot of her role is singing, dancing, having to be able to have like your full lung capacity so that you can sing and so that you can dance, I just can't help but think how uncomfortable that must have been literally all the time. It must have been so restricting and so hellish. And then of course this kind of fixation with how Judy's body was looking all the time. Like, I feel like 16 years old is the time when you are like most aware of your body and most I mean, you're going through, like I said, like a lot of physical changes, so you are very aware of your body. You might be very insecure about your body. You're getting used to maybe having boobs when you've not had boobs before, hips when you've not had hips before, curves in places, and it can be like a really awkward kind of jarring time when you start to go through that transition of puberty anyway, let alone having literally every single adult in your life become so obsessed with the fact that your body no longer looks like a little 10-year-old girl's body. And this obsession with Judy's body didn't just stop there, but her food intake was monitored so closely that she was practically on a starvation diet throughout the filming of The Wizard of Oz, because the studio was so obsessed with not letting her gain any weight. And according to them, because she was only 4'11", she wasn't able to hide any of the weight that she managed to put on, and they were trying to keep her as slim as possible, once again to portray the role of someone a lot younger than what she was. It's alleged that Judy was only allowed to eat chicken soup, drink black coffee, and she was encouraged to smoke up to 80 cigarettes a day to suppress her appetite. And apparently as well, people on the movie sets, such as the producers, would send around like sneaky little notes to each other, updating each other on what it was that Judy had been eating throughout the day, to make sure that she was sticking to exactly what had been agreed that she would stick to eating, and that she wasn't eating more than she was quote quote unquote allowed to eat. It's also rumoured as well that people were actually sent to her home to spy on her and make sure that she was actually following her diet while she was still at home. This, as well as being told that she looked like a little pig in pigtails by the then head of MGM production company for the movie. He would also refer to her as my little hunchback. I'm sorry, like, I just cannot fucking imagine the actual emotional impact and trauma that this would have on someone. I mean, I am 31, and if somebody was that closely like monitoring my body and like so obsessed with my body, like, that's obviously gonna, I feel like it would cause anybody some damage, right? Of course, but like, she's only 16, like, she is still like a little girl, she's still developing, her brain's not fully developed, she's still learning who she is, she's still probably getting used to her body as it is growing, and I hate this so much. I hate it here. And for Judy, time with peers of her own age was also extremely limited, perhaps even forbidden, as her life was to pretty much revolve around this movie. During the filming of The Wizard of Oz, the abuse of Judy also led to actual violent abuse as well, when she wouldn't stop giggling during one of her scenes where she was to slap the cowardly lion. She must have found it like a little bit awkward, a little bit funny that she had to do it, and she wouldn't stop laughing. So the director, Victor Fleming, took her to the side, slapped her in the face, and told her to take things more seriously. I would just tell you right now, if that was my daughter, he would be fucking dead. And worst of all, it was claimed that Judy had been sexually assaulted on set by some of the actors playing the Munchkins. In his book, Judy and I, her ex-husband Sid Luft wrote, they'd make Judy's life miserable on set by putting their hands under her dress. The men were 40 or more years old. They thought they could get away with anything because they were so small. But I just have to point out, by the time that these allegations had been brought to light, however, only one of the actors involved, Jerry Marin, was actually still alive, but at age 98, his health had declined quite rapidly and he wasn't in a position where he was able to speak out on the matter or give any kind of interview, and he died shortly after these allegations. And I will just say, these abuse allegations came from Judy's ex-husband, not Judy herself, so I don't know. Judy did also say, however, that one of the men, who was about 40 years old, asked her to dinner and she said no, that her mother wouldn't like it. And he responded with, bring your ma too, 2 broads for the price of 1. But since neither Judy nor the men who were or were not involved aren't actually here to speak on it anymore, I will just leave it there. I will say that these things are only alleged and not in any way proven. Judy did, however, say famously in an interview that the Munchkins were notoriously drunk and wild. She was quoted saying there were hundreds of them, they put them all in one hotel, they got smashed every night and the police would pick them up in butterfly nets, the poor things. Which I just feel like, from the tone of that and the way in which she said it, seems like light-hearted and jokey and not like she was being serious with that, but who knows. Jerry Marin at the time responded, saying that him and the other Munchkin actors couldn't possibly get drunk on their salary and that Toto was paid more than them. And this is actually true. The Munchkins were paid $50 a week, which is equivalent to about $1,090 in today's money. And Toto was paid $125 a week, equating to about $2,700 today. Not bad for being a cairn terrier. Judy earned $500 per week, which is over $10,000 in today's money, which I personally would not say no to myself, but considering what she went through on set, I would say that is not nearly enough. And Judy is the undeniable star of the show and the main protagonist, but her male co-stars were actually all paid considerably more than her, with the Tin Man, the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion all making between $2,500 a week and $3,000 a week, which is over $65,000 in today's money, which is wild. I can understand maybe their parts were still really big parts, and they did have we'll get into the costumes that they had to like wear. We'll get into that. So I can maybe see that's maybe why they were compensated with more money. But if you think about Judy getting $500 per week when she is the star, and then them getting $3,000 per week when they are still stars, but they are like the second after Dorothy. It does seem a little bit unfair and, how you say, misogyny. Now, on to the costumes. Of course, we did mention Judy being corseted into her costume with her breasts bandaged down, but that wasn't even the worst of the costume horrors for the actors, honestly. So we'll start with the Tin Man. As you know, and as the name suggests, he is a man made of tin. And for this tin-like effect, the original actor who played the role of the Tin Man was dusted with aluminium powder all over his skin. And when he started to become rapidly ill, it was discovered that he actually had aluminium poisoning. The studio at first didn't even believe him that he was so ill, and he had to get his nurse to actually come to the studio and be like, hey, he actually is that ill. He is actually suffering with poisoning right now due to makeup that you have used on him. He actually had to stay in hospital for 2 weeks and had to stay in an oxygen tent, and for the rest of his life he had respiratory issues, and he blamed it on, I quote, that damn movie. He was then let go from the movie because he was taking just too long to recover. How inconsiderate of him, literally dying of aluminium poisoning, but hurry up and get back to work, you know. That's when the new actor Jack Haley, who you will know as the Tin Man, was given the role, and he wasn't actually made aware of what had happened to the previous Tin Man, but this time they made an aluminium paste for the makeup instead of a powder, hoping that that would stop any particles kind of seeping into his skin or getting into his mouth. And it does seem that the worst that Jack experienced was a pretty serious eye infection that would eventually clear up. So I guess the aluminium paste worked a lot better than the powder. And the Scarecrow, who is portrayed by Ray Bolger, had a rubber prosthetic mask glued to his face every day. And you're not going to believe what this mask was made of, man. You know how like the highly carcinogenic, dangerous material asbestos? That's what was being glued to his face every single fucking day. Like, you can't actually even make this shit up. Asbestos face mask aside, the mask actually left almost permanent marks on Ray's face, and he said that the lines that were left over his face from the prosthetic actually took over a year to fully fade away. And listen, this next one about the costumes, I don't know why, right? This just like fucked me up so much. I don't know why, like this, like out of everything, I'm like, I don't know. So the Cowardly Lion, portrayed by Bear Lar, was actually wearing a real lion hide. His costume was made from a real lion. Why is that fact for me? Like, why did that fuck me up so much? I actually don't know. But anyway, this lion hide, as you can imagine, it was very heavy. It weighed about 9 pounds, and it was so hot when they were filming. So they actually filmed The Wizard of Oz in the California heat. So imagine wearing a fucking 9 pound lion hide while you're in the middle of California filming for fucking long days, probably more than a whole day sometimes. And Bert would actually sweat so much when he was filming that when he took the costume off at the end of the day, it actually weighed about 18 pounds, which is more than double the weight of what it started. So you're fucking singing, you're dancing, you're trying to get your lines out, you're in the middle of California heat, you're wearing a real fucking lion, and it's weighing 18 pounds and you're dripping a sweat. Also, because of the prosthetics used on his face, it was actually requested that he didn't eat at all through filming his scenes, and that instead he would be on a completely liquid diet and he would be fed through a straw so as not to mess up his prosthetics. And at first he did agree to this, but as time was going on and filming days were getting longer and longer and longer, he was eventually like, here, nah, like, I need to fucking eat, like, I need energy, man. So eventually they did end up agreeing that he would be allowed to eat. What a luxury. So Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West, probably got off worst of all when it comes to fucking injuries and shit like that. So as you know, she is like head to toe green. So this green makeup that she was wearing was a copper based makeup, and it was so toxic that she actually did have to remain on a liquid diet and be fed through a straw, because there was a big fear around if she was eating, some of this copper makeup would be ingested and that would be bad. And I just think, listen, if what you're wearing on your face is so fucking toxic that you're so terrified about it getting in your mouth, you should not have it on your face. Obviously, I'm not like going off on like Margaret Hamilton or anything here. Like, I'm like going off at the studio. It's like, could you not have used like green face paint? I don't know. I feel like there was another option there that we weren't looking into, instead of just being like, hey, let's put this highly toxic and dangerous substance all over your face and body. However, this copper-based makeup was so potent that it actually did absorb into her skin via her pores, and it reportedly took weeks and weeks and weeks after filming for the green to actually fade from her skin because it was so deeply embedded in. That's not all. During the scene where the Wicked Witch disappears in a puff of red smoke from Munchkin land, I guess, obviously remember back then, everything was kind of like done by hand and there wasn't any like CGI or anything, so it was like a lot of like stage trickery and stuff like that would have to be done for these kind of things. So the idea was that she would disappear in a puff of smoke that was created by fire, and Margaret Hamilton would have to very quickly get off the stage and get out of the way of the fire. But unfortunately, during this take, she wasn't able to leave the stage quick enough before the fire was lit, and her broom and her costume caught on fire. This caused second-degree burns to Margaret's nose, cheek, forehead, eyelids, and her eyebrows and eyelashes were burned off, and she also suffered third-degree burns to the backs of her hands. When this happened, you would think that the studio would be like freaking out. Oh my god, a cast member of ours has been hurt by something that we essentially done. We'll like take her to hospital, we'll make sure that she's okay. You'd think they would be like immediately like on it, making sure that she was fine, but they actually did nothing, and I mean they did fuck all. So Margaret says that she waited for them to get her help, but they never did, and instead she had to call a friend by herself and get her friend to come and pick her up from the set and take her to hospital. And then an executive from the show had the absolute audacity to call Margaret up the next day and ask, when will you be back in work? Not, how are you since you've had your fucking face and hands almost burned off, but when will you be back? And it was actually 6 weeks before she could come back, and unlike the Tin Man, Margaret wasn't fired. So I guess too much of the filming had already taken place by this point, so they knew that they couldn't really do any more without her, and they really had no other opportunity but to just like pause production for now. Whereas with the first original Tin Man, his incident when he became very, very ill was right at the start of filming, so it wouldn't have took as much effort to just kind of refilm his parts again with a new actor. When eventually Margaret did return to set, her face had healed but her hands hadn't healed, so they actually had to give her green gloves to wear to hide the burns from her hands. And she said that the reason that she never sued them was because she knew how show business worked, and that she would never get another role ever again. When she eventually did return to set, they even had the further fucking audacity to ask her to do another fire scene, even though she had told them, like, I will come back on the, like, my one thing is no more fire. And someone who had been so badly burned, you'd think you'd be like, yeah, you know what, actually, that's fair enough, we'll fucking cut the fire out for you. They actually tried to get her to do another fucking fire scene. Anyway, she point blank refused, and they had to get her a stunt double. Her name was Betty Danko, and this is the scene where the Wicked Witch is flying through the sky on her broom, and she's writing "Surrender, Dorothy" in the smoke in the sky. And this scene was done by having the actress sit on a smoking pipe and kind of have the pipe look like it was a broomstick. When Betty was sitting on the pipe, it actually exploded and left her with very severe injuries that needed a 2-week hospital stay and left her legs permanently scarred for life. Betty said, I felt as though my scalp was coming off. I guess that's because my hat and black wig were torn loose. And then this scene was then given to another stunt double, and luckily this time this actress was not injured. Guys, honestly, this fucking movie set was an absolute fucking shit show. Even Toto didn't get out uninjured, like the poor little baby, like played by Terry. And by the way, Toto is actually a girl dog as well. Toto in the movie is supposed to be a boy, but Toto in real life, Terry is a little girl, or was a little girl. I'm assuming 85 years later, Terry is no longer with us. Little Terry actually got stepped on by one of the witch's guards and had to be out of filming for weeks and get a double, but thankfully she did make a full recovery and didn't have any lasting injuries, and like the true star that she was, she returned to set as soon as she could. Guys, I'd be keeping my dogs like so far away from this fucking set. And let's just, we briefly spoke about asbestos when we spoke about the Scarecrow's face mask, but let's kind of circle round. We're talking about asbestos again. So you might remember the scene where Dorothy falls asleep in a field of poppies. and then to wake her up, the good witch Glinda sprinkles a gentle flurry of snow over her to wake her up. Not so relaxing when you realise that that gentle flurry of snow was asbestos, literally sprinkling all over her. Now, apparently at this time it was pretty common for asbestos to be used for snow because it was relatively cheap and it looked kind of fluffy enough that the audience would probably believe that this was real snow. So this definitely wasn't an uncommon practice, but at the time of filming, the dangers of asbestos was already incredibly well known. So it's not like you could be like, oh, they were like all those years ago, like they didn't know like all the fucking damage that asbestos can do to you. No, they knew. They been known. They knowed. And it's also worth noting as well that the Wicked Witch of the West's broomstick was also made of the same material, but luckily it seems that and miraculously, no one on the set actually suffered any ill health because of the asbestos, which is a fucking true miracle, because I feel like with this movie, what could go wrong did go wrong. Maybe the gods were like, you know what, man, they've fucking suffered enough, let's let them dodge this bullet. And lastly, I would like to talk about conspiracy theories. I would like to debunk one conspiracy theory, and I would like to perhaps spark a new conspiracy theory within you. So I think one of the most common Wizard of Oz conspiracy theories is the hanging munchkin. In the scene where Dorothy, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man skip off down the yellow brick road, it has long been rumoured that there is a silhouette of a munchkin who has hung himself in the background, and you can kind of see that in the forest in the background. And for decades, stories of an actor killing himself. I think there was even some stories around that he had been like, he was heartbroken and that's why he hung himself or whatever. Like, these stories have been rife, and although the movie is cursed as fuck, you will be pleased to know that the hanging munchkin is just not true. What you can actually see is a large bird, probably an emu or a crane. You see, on the set of The Wizard of Oz, there were actually a lot of wild birds to kind of give the place a more outdoorsy, magical feel to it. And then it was actually when researching this video that someone was like, yeah, you can even see 2 peacocks outside of the Tin Man's shack at the scene when Dorothy and the Scarecrow are trying to like oil him up. And I was like, no, there's not. And like I said, I watched The Wizard of Oz for scripting this video, and then I still didn't even notice the peacocks, so I like wound it back and watched it again, and you can actually see like a bird in the background with when they are like oiling up the Tin Man. It doesn't look like a peacock to me though. Like, I don't know, I am obviously not a fucking bird expert, but to me it doesn't look like a peacock, but there definitely is birds there. So yeah, not a hanging munchkin, just a bird. And lastly, to get a conspiracy theory discussion going, this is a little bit more light-hearted. I watched a video called The Terrifying Truth About the Wizard of Oz by someone called The Theorizer. I will leave a link to that video in my description because I found it highly entertaining. It made me laugh a lot, and I actually agree with every single word that he says in it. So he talks about his theory of why the true bad guy in The Wizard of Oz is not the Wicked Witch of the West, but it is in fact Glinda the Good Witch. And I have to say, like, I honestly could not agree more. He goes into it in like much more detail and in like a really, really funny, comical way. Listen, any Wicked fans out there, don't come for me, okay? This is just a little bit of fun. But when it comes to this movie, Glinda's the bad guy. It's so fucking obvious. His argument for it is pretty compelling, and you'll have to let me know what you think. And even growing up, right, you would think that Glinda would have been everything that me as a child would have loved. Pink, fairy-like, princessy-like, very ethereal, beautiful. That is everything that childhood me loved. Nah, I never liked Glinda the Good Witch. Bad vibes, like real bad vibes. And now I know why. I did always wonder why she lied to Dorothy, because she gave Dorothy those ruby slippers, right, that apparently could have got her home at any time. But why did she make her fucking do all like her dirty work for her then? Like, expose the Wizard of Oz, kill the Wicked Witch of the West. Like, she just got Dorothy to do absolutely everything, then at the end to be like, just click your heels and then you'll go back home. But you can see Glinda, like, she has her wand and she's like swirling it around Dorothy as she's clicking her heels. So is it actually the shoes that's doing? I don't know. I never trusted Glinda, and that video just confirmed it to me. Glinda the Good Witch, Glinda the bitch. Again, apologies to any Wicked fans. I have actually never seen Wicked, unfortunately, but it is on my bucket list to see Wicked. Oh my god, and I'm so excited for they're bringing it to the cinema as well, which I think will be so amazing. I don't actually know who any of the cast are apart from Ariana Grande, who is playing Glinda the Good Witch, and I feel like her portrayal of that is going to be fucking amazing. And I've seen like a very small clip of her voice, and she has this like really cool like operatic like voice or so. Honestly, like, that fucking girl's vocal range blows my mind. So I honestly, like, I can't wait to see Wicked in the cinema. I can't wait to see what Ariana Grande does with that role. Like, I think she's just going to be like truly like amazing with it. And the dress was also really stunning as well that they had her in, and I like how it is a clear nod to the original Wizard of Oz movie, so I'm super excited about that. But yeah, it's on my bucket list as well to definitely go and see Wicked in the theatre. I unfortunately haven't really been to the theatre to see too many things in my life, which is a shame because I love musicals, I love theatre. It's just maybe this will be the year for me going to go and see more things. Anyway, I've totally went off on a whole tangent. Nobody cares. So this brings an end to the video exposing all the horrors of Oz. So let me know what you think, any opinions that you have on anything that I've brought up today. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a like, leave a wee comment and subscribe if you would like to see more from me, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.